Number 15. Fish or be fished. When you go fishing, you usually go fishing for the big game, but sometimes the big game ends up coming back after you. Gary Cagle was a fan of the water. The freediver and avid fisherman was constantly looking for his next big catch near the Florida Keys, but he didn't always follow the rules. Despite the fact that they are a protected species, Cagle went on the hunt for the Goliath groupers in 2006, and he found what he was looking for. He pierced the fish's skin with his spear gun, only to be startled by its size and immense strength. Cagle was yanked along by the fish as it tried to escape. He became caught in the wire, which led to his second blunder. He forgot to pack his knife. Unable to get free of the line and trapped underwater, Cagle eventually drowned. A day later, his body was discovered, still attached to the dead grouper, who had likely become a legend among other fish for the day because he truly caught the big one. Number 14. Heads up. Bumping your head is one of the most frustrating accidents a person can experience. Even a quick whack to the hardest low-hanging shelf, though, pales in comparison to what one daredevil with a liking for trains and trespassing suffered in North Carolina back in 2018. In an attempt to satisfy his adrenaline junkie desires, he climbed onto a train's roof and tried to ride it as if it were a wild metal stallion. He'd been issued warnings before for similar situations, so he'd probably gotten his head around the balancing act that train top cruising would demand. But, his thoughts were, redirected when the train passed beneath a low-hanging bridge. He apparently didn't see the bridge in time and slammed into it at full speed. It turns out that it isn't very good for the human body to hit solid objects at over 90 miles or just under 150 kilometers per hour. His skull was discovered on the side of the track 2 months later, about 138 miles or just over 220 kilometers from where his body was discovered the day of the accident. Authorities came to a disturbing conclusion with this evidence. He'd been literally decapitated the instant he hit the bridge's roof, and his body proceeded on its journey until it fell off the train. The conclusion is simple. Don't be a train cowboy. It's a huge pain in the neck. Number 13. Disney's new Dumbo. Gaston is an extremely arrogant character from Disney's Beauty and the Beast, with an endless supply of misguided self-confidence. So it's entirely possible that the actor who played Gaston at Disney World Orlando was still in character when he caused his own catastrophic end in 2015. It appears so since he had too much faith in his own skull's strength as he launched a rocket from the top of his head. He'd been drinking heavily and had joked about the idea when the firework he put on his head to demonstrate caught spark. Within seconds, the mortar tube exploded in a vivid, blazing explosion that no amount of alcohol could dull. Without a doubt, Disney World needed to find a new Gaston. Hopefully the new one is less of a method actor and more professional. Number 12. Till Death Do Us Part. Passing away while doing the dirty is perhaps one of the finest, or most embarrassing, ways to go. But for an old man who hired an escort in 2016, the true disgrace occurred after the deed. Sadly, the man died from a heart attack in the heat of passion. To his paid companion's horror, though, the combination of the escort's panic and the man's no longer circulating blood flow caused the duo to become, well, stuck together, literally. The victim had no choice but to seek medical attention after being unable to break free from the horrifyingly creepy hug. She was brought past dozens of hospital onlookers after paramedics picked her up, still very much bonded to the man she'd given a happy ending to. We assume the whole "until death do us part" thing only applies to married couples. Number 11. The Deadly Stroll. Drive-through safari parks are terrific opportunities for anyone who loves nature's most dangerous creatures and wants to get up close and personal with them. It is fairly safe as long as one basic guideline is followed. At all times, remain inside your vehicle. But on a hot summer day in 2016, at Beijing's Badaling Safari World, that rule was violated in an act of sheer stupidity. It happened after an altercation between a passenger and the driver of a car who was passing through the tiger enclosure. In a fit of rage, the passenger stormed out of the vehicle. What a stupid move! Within seconds, a tiger lunged and caught her in its jaws. But while this in itself was a mind-numbingly dumb decision, the response of the other passengers in the car proved fatal. One of the passengers figured that she could overcome the tiger herself, and as a result, she jumped out and ran over to the big cat. She was instantly slain by one of nature's most efficient killing machines. Ironically, the person she was attempting to save lived, and if she had just waited a second or two longer for the highly experienced park personnel to take over, she could have as well. It should go without saying, if you battle a tiger unarmed, you will lose. Unless you're Hercules. Have you ever had something crazy happen to you with animals in captivity? Let us know in the comments down below, and if you like the video so far, be sure to subscribe to see more. Number 10. The cure for boredom. When you're prone to making ridiculously bad choices, tempting fate is twice as stupid as it would be for normal people. That didn't stop a Brazilian student from proudly displaying the infinitely wise motto, "Better to die from vodka than boredom," in his Facebook bio. You can probably guess where this is going. In 2015, during a drinking contest, he put that saying to the test by downing 25 shots of vodka in less than 60 seconds. The student said he felt nauseous and fainted shortly after sinking the final drop, and soon after, he died of alcohol poisoning on the way to the hospital. Even over an hour, that many rounds could have been lethal, but in a minute, it's just downright absurd. Anyone who was rooting for this person while he slammed those shots is probably just as stupid as he was. Number 9. Experienced jumper. The next daredevil made a surprising mistake during a spot check. Ivan Lester McGuire was a seasoned skydiver who had moved on to his next assignment, which required him to work with other parachutists in North Carolina. McGuire opted to record the other divers as they dropped to Earth during a collective dive in 1988. He made sure his camera was ready for filming, got into position, and leapt out of the plane once the others had leapt off. He had just forgotten one small detail: his parachute. In the excitement, he forgot to put his on. Instead of capturing the other divers as they approached the ground, he managed to capture the rapidly approaching Earth as he free fell towards a fatal collision, an unexpected finish for a man who had made over 800 jumps. Number 8. Weddings are a blast. It's not our business to judge other cultures' traditions, but a circle of dancing men blasting shotguns into the air doesn't seem like the smartest way to celebrate a wedding, let alone the safest one. Unfortunately, it was the tactic of choice in 2019 for a bunch of Indian wedding goers with a fondness for celebration gunshots. The initial round of gunfire, fired dangerously close to the dancers' heads, nearly deafened some of them. Despite this, the second round was still fired, this time without any regard for safety or any attempts to try and aim at the sky. One of the bullets struck one of the shotgun-wielding guests straight in the face. The oblivious guest who shot the round proceeded to fire more rounds happily until he saw what he'd done. Needless to say, the festivities ended once he decided to look at the situation around him. Hey guys, how about we start using wedding bells instead of shotgun shells from now on? Number 7. The flamethrower. When a blowtorch gets in the hands of our species' less than brilliant members, it's always wise to take a step or 10 back. Or better yet, move to the next county over. If this wasn't that obvious. In June 2019, a man from Topeka, Kansas made it very clear when he found what looked like an empty metal drum. A curious man decided that cutting the object open with a blowtorch was his best option. It's unclear what he had hoped to accomplish with this drum in the first place, since it burst violently before he had a chance to complete his mission. Apparently, he ignored the bold warnings that said that the drum contained methanol, which is a highly flammable substance. For people like this, warnings to stay away from naked flames must not have sounded too threatening. Whether he read the labels or not, this guy's hasty blowtorch trigger finger cost him his life. Number 6. Convoy of Death. On a spring night in April 2016, a rather strange group was spotted chugging along a road in Louisiana. One man was driving a sit-down lawnmower while another sat on the bonnet, and the third sat in a wheelchair, of all things, holding onto the back of the lawnmower and being dragged along. The three were said to be having the time of their lives as they cruised on a busy road. That is, until they were hit from behind by an unsuspecting truck. As surprising as it may seem, a dark highway wasn't the best setting for a tag-along DIY joyride. Amazingly, the only person killed in the incident was the man driving the lawnmower, who seems to have started the absurd activity. Hopefully his friends' mowers will stay firmly on the lawn from this day on. Number 5. A highway joyride. Riding in a bicycle lane can be risky enough sometimes, and as we just learned, being on the road at night in anything besides vehicles adds to that risk. But riding a bicycle on the highway at night? Don't even try it. This clear no-no should speak for itself for the vast majority of people. But in September 2019, one man stood out from the crowd when he decided to go on a late-night bike ride along the 405 freeway in Long Beach, California. He was cycling in the auxiliary lane, which is designed to let cars speed up or slow down on the 60-mile-per-hour highway in the dark. Unsurprisingly, a car which was unaware of the presented danger and not expecting to see a cyclist in the dark drove into him at full speed, unable to stop. A collision that should never have happened killed the rider and possibly scarred the driver for the rest of his life. So what did we learn from this? Unless you're a superhuman capable of riding your bicycle at speeds of 60 miles or just under 100 kilometers per hour or higher, leave the highways to the motorists. Number 4, the condom criminal. Before the big bucks come along, every skilled criminal has to start with tiny jobs to gain experience. That being said, robbing a machine full of condoms for its contents and cash isn't exactly the typical sign of a budding criminal genius. In fact, it's the opposite. But on Christmas Day 2015, a bunch of rookie German criminals decided to do just that. They stuffed explosives into a condom dispenser and lit them, but much to their surprise, the explosion shot parts of the metal container outwards with enough speed to make them lethal projectiles. One of the robbers was hit in the head and died soon after. The machine wasn't in much better shape though. I'm sorry to state the obvious, but I believe the condom-crazed criminal would have been okay if he had just worn protection. Number 3, snakes on a couch. Many people associate having a snake in their home with a living nightmare, while for others snakes can be a great pet. But for a woman from Indiana, one snake wasn't enough. Her ideal number was 140 to be exact. As an enthusiast and part-time breeder, you'd think the 36-year-old would be well aware of the dangers of living with reptiles that could kill you. But she lowered her vigilance or simply felt more comfortable letting the beast roam free among her, and one of the snakes turned on her. The village sheriff was horrified the next day to discover the reptile enthusiast being held in a lethal embrace by one of her favorite pets, an 8-foot-long or just about 2.5-meter python. It had strangled her to death just hours before, but it was still wrapped around her neck, indicating that when a python wants a hug, there are no exceptions. Number 2, bedtime is important. We're regularly reminded of the importance of getting a good night's sleep, and for good reason, too. But for one Chinese man in 2014, the consequences extended far beyond being sleepy the next morning. As a huge soccer fan, losing sleep during the World Cup due to the 11-hour time difference between host country Brazil and his own country was no big deal and typical. But the tension, exhaustion, and exhilaration of seeing soccer's greatest players go head-to-head non-stop for the 48 hours he stayed up took their toll on his body. It's believed that his extreme tiredness caused a brain hemorrhage, the chances of which occurring dramatically increased due to sleep deprivation. He died shortly after Costa Rica defeated Uruguay 3-1 in the day's last match. It's unknown whether he was a supporter of the losing team and took the loss especially hard. But if my parents told me I might die from staying up too late as a teenager, I would have definitely gotten more sleep. And you should too. Number 1. Hey, look, no hands. Showing off while cruising at 85 miles per hour or just under 140 kilometers an hour on a motorcycle is without a doubt one of the stupidest things you can do. That didn't stop a Russian motorcycling vlogger, though, who considered himself a daredevil on his Harley-Davidson in June 2019. He shot a vlog while steering with his feet and filming with his hands, bragging about how his ability to not give up made these things possible. The biker soon lost control and his Harley flipped dozens of times, smacking against the tarmac just moments after sharing the insanely dangerous footage to a friend. The vehicle was only slightly less damaged than the rider was, though, but even the most skilled mechanics and doctors couldn't simply put the two back together. Texting and driving is bad enough, but if you follow in this guy's footsteps, all you have to look forward to is the rough, hard asphalt road. Number 10. Death by Taco. 41-year-old Dana Hutchings claimed to be a champion. What kind of champion? The stuffing-your-face kind. Specifically, Dana loved tacos. So when he was at a minor league baseball game at Chuck Chauncey Park in Fresno, California, he eagerly signed up for the taco eating contest. The contest was being held in honor of the game between the Fresno Grizzlies and the Memphis Redbirds, but it would be the last minor league game that Dana ever went to. While shoving tacos into his mouth as fast as he possibly could, he started to choke. He choked so hard that he needed medical assistance. According to Tony Bodie, an officer who was present at the time of the incident, Dana made it to the hospital where medical staff had to literally pull taco chunks out of his airway. Dana had no way to breathe, and they couldn't help him in time. He died right there on the table. If you don't know what you're doing in an eating contest, sometimes you can choke on your food. Dana's 18-year-old son is now trying to sue the event organizers for negligence in the situation. The son claims that his father was never warned of the risks involved with the eating contest and that it's all their fault that he's dead. Do you agree? Let us know in the comments below. Number 9. VR fail. VR headsets are all the rage. It's pretty sick how futuristic the console is, and if you haven't tried one, you should. Well, maybe not after hearing this story. A 44-year-old guy in Moscow, Russia purchased a virtual reality headset. We don't know what games he got, but we do know he was pretty pumped to try out this new and revolutionary piece of tech. Sadly for him, he became the unluckiest VR user ever. He also became the first virtual reality-related death ever reported. As he was moving through his apartment with the headset on, he fell face first and hit a glass table. He sliced himself up so badly that he died from a loss of blood before he could even get the VR headset off. This is according to Yulia Ivanova, the senior assistant to the head of Russian Investigative Committee. Police haven't released any information about which headset he was wearing or what game he was playing, but have issued a warning to others using the VR device. Be careful, and make sure you have plenty of room to get lost in your new virtual world. Number 8. Duel to the death. Dueling to the death is something that should have stayed in the Middle Ages. Yet a mother of 4 sent her lover off to participate in a medieval duel. With who? Her ex-husband. If this sounds like a bad idea, that's because it is. The lady that had the idea for her lover and her former lover to fight in this barbaric way was 35-year-old Asta Juskowskian. She wanted to see which of her admirers would win her hand in a fight to the death. Well, it didn't really matter in the end because she's now in jail for the rest of her life over it. Asta left her husband for a man she met online that was 25 years younger than her. His name was Mantas Kvardaras. Mantas had just been released from a Lithuanian prison on charges of sexual assault. She ended her relationship with her husband to date this criminal. But the husband wasn't ready for the relationship to end. He still loved his wife and couldn't stand the thought of losing her. Both men were adamant that she belonged to them, so she decided that they could settle the argument in a fight to the death. Seems okay, right? During the duel, Mantas stabbed the husband 35 times. He then left him to bleed out and die and bought a pizza on his way home so that he and Asta could celebrate the victory. But the victory was short-lived. The police quickly found the murder weapon dumped in a garbage can, connected it to the new boyfriend, and then got the whole story from Asta. She couldn't believe it when the judge gave her life with a minimum of 24 years. Number 7. Prank gone wrong. Faking a kidnapping sounds like a horrible idea, right? Right. A 20-year-old woman from Mexico thought it would be hilarious to make a TikTok video where she pretends she's getting kidnapped. This attempt at going viral turned out to be the worst idea the girl ever had, as she was accidentally killed. Her name was Arlene Martinez, and she died instantly from a bullet penetrating her skull. Here's what the prank was supposed to look like. Martinez and another person were tied up and blindfolded. Then the people who were the fake kidnappers were supposed to make some fake demands, to make the whole thing realistic. Sadly, it was way more real than they had bargained for. One of their props happened to be a real gun. Nobody knows why they used a real gun, but whatever the case, when one of the fake kidnappers pressed the gun against Martinez's head, he pulled the trigger. He must not have known the gun was actually loaded because when he pulled the trigger, Arlene's brains went flying. 2 of the men who were involved in the shooting fled the scene afterward and have still not been found by police. In fact, the Mexican police have not made any arrests in the case. They say the investigation is still ongoing. Number 6. The Hickey of Death. A 17-year-old boy in Mexico City has died from getting a hickey. According to reports, Julio Macia Gonzalez had to get emergency medical treatment after he suffered convulsions during a family dinner. His family panicked when they saw him start to shake uncontrollably, and it all happened after a night out with his girlfriend. Sadly, the paramedics were not able to save him, but they did find a huge purple hickey on the boy's neck, and doctors believe it was the hickey that caused him to convulse and die. Who knew you could die from that? How is this possible? Doctors say the hickey formed a blood clot that traveled straight to Julio's brain, causing him to have a stroke. According to a stroke expert contacted by CBS News New York after the story, this kind of thing is highly unlikely, but it is indeed possible. Neurologist Dr. Mitchell Elkind says that direct pressure on the carotid artery can be enough to tear the vessel, resulting in a blood clot that rushes to the brain. It's incredibly rare, but it does happen. In 2011, there was even another recorded case of a 44-year-old woman in New Zealand becoming paralyzed after a hickey gave her a blood clot in her heart. Imagine the horror his girlfriend felt when she realized she was the cause of his death. Let's keep the neck sucking to a minimum, kids. Number 5. Lava lamp. Having a lava lamp was all the rage, 20 to 30 years ago, but nowadays, people have moved on to more impressive things, or so we thought. You'd think as a 24-year-old grown-up, Philip Quinn wouldn't be so fascinated by a groovy lamp, but you'd be wrong. In fact, for some reason, he thought it was a good idea to put his lava lamp on the stove while it was on. What's the worst that could happen? Maybe the stuff inside the lamp would boil or melt? Nope. The glass got so hot that pressure built up, causing the whole thing to explode. Quinn was standing nearby, and a sharp piece of glass went flying into his heart during the blast. You'd never think something like this could happen, but it did. His parents found his body later on, where Philip died all alone in his trailer. The only reason they came to check on him was because his concerned girlfriend called them after not hearing from him for a while. After his body was examined, they determined that the shard didn't kill Philip instantly. He was able to make his way into his room before dying of blood loss. Surprisingly, he wasn't intoxicated or under the influence of anything. He just wanted to see what would happen to the lava lamp. Well, now you know. Number 4. Stuck in the cat door. After a woman in Florida kicked out her boyfriend for reasons unknown, she was beyond shocked to find him trying to sneak back into her house through the cat door. 33-year-old Charles Tucker Jr. got stuck in the cat door and died. The girlfriend phoned the police when she found him, and they arrived about 4 minutes later, but Charles was already dead. He was found with one arm through the door and his head crammed in beside it. He obviously had not been able to fit his body through the itty-bitty cat door. He was way too big. Police think he was trying to reach up to unlock the door. Well, this desperate ex-boyfriend's attempt at seeing the girl who kicked him out of his house resulted in his death. Imagine trying to break into your ex-girlfriend's house like a creepy stalker and strangling yourself in a cat door. Who knew that one door for a little kitty would be a death trap for a grown man? Now that's a dumb way to die. Number 3. Exploding keg. Gilson de Nascimento was celebrating his 43rd birthday in Brazil when a beer keg exploded. Gilson had rented the giant barrel of booze for his epic party because obviously the more alcohol there is, the more fun people would have. But this turned out to be the worst idea ever. When he tried to tap the keg, no beer came out. This was obviously a big deal. As a locksmith shop owner, Gilson figured he could solve the problem pretty quickly by just fixing it himself. So he broke out his tools and started messing around with the spout that dispenses the beer. The keg went off like a bomb. It blew up, sending shards of metal flying in every direction. Unfortunately for the birthday boy, his face was right in front of the keg. He may as well have been standing on a landmine. A shard of metal ripped through his face and punctured his brain. He died instantly. And to make things worse, the repairman for the keg arrived 2 minutes later. If Gilson had just waited for the repairman instead of trying to do it himself, he may have actually enjoyed his birthday party instead of being carried to the morgue in a body bag. Number 2. Hair straightening gone wrong. In Brazil, a 14-year-old girl was killed while using a hair straightener. Her name was Thamiris de Conciaca Silva, and she died instantly the moment her wet hair touched an exposed wire on the flat iron. She was at her home in the northeast of the country, in the town of Sítio Tubarão, when this unthinkable tragedy took place. Even though her family called emergency services right away, it was too late. The hair straightener had a wire sticking out, which delivered an intense electric shock when it touched her wet hair. Who would have ever thought that just trying to straighten your hair could have deadly consequences? But believe it or not, this was not the only electrical fatality in Brazil in recent days. Just a month before this poor teenager was killed, yet another teenage girl died in Brazil from being electrocuted. This girl was named Raja Ferreira de Oliveira, and she was charging her cell phone when the house was struck by lightning during a storm. The lightning somehow went through her entire house, up the electric cable of her phone, and straight into her brain. Just like the other poor girl, she died immediately. The family performed first aid and drove her to the hospital, but by that time, she was already dead. Number 1. Too much oxygen. Something extremely bizarre happened to a young boy named Michael Colombini in 2001. The young boy needed to get an MRI test. MRI is short for magnetic resonance imaging, but something went terribly wrong. A nurse walked into the room with Michael and the MRI machine when she wasn't supposed to. She was carrying an oxygen tank, which became attracted to the activated machine. It was pulled out of her hands and propelled like a missile straight into the circular opening of the MRI. It smacked 6-year-old Michael in his head, where he lay sedated inside the machine being tested for a brain tumor. If he didn't have something wrong with his head before, he definitely did now. The oxygen tank hit him so hard that he died 2 days later from complications. In this case, it was definitely the nurse at fault. She never should have entered the room. The hospital accepted responsibility and offered the family $1 million to settle quietly. They denied the money and took extensive litigation, not only against the hospital, but also against 9 others involved, including doctors, a nurse, technicians, the MRI suite administration company, and the MRI manufacturer. The family made understandable claims for wrongful death, pre-death conscious pain, and suffering and punitive damages. And in the end, the family of the boy settled their claim with the hospital, the Westchester Medical Center in Valhalla, and were awarded $2.9 million as compensation. But no amount of money in the world can bring back their beloved son. Number 12. Hot dog. It's no secret that there are some extremely bizarre people out there with some extremely bizarre fetishes. Don't worry, this video is PG. Although after hearing this, you may never eat hot dogs again. A beautiful young girl named Suki was left heartbroken. You see, Suki really enjoyed when people threw up on her. Yeah, she likes vomit all over her body. She is an emetophiliac, or a person who has an overwhelming desire to be puked on. This is pretty gross, but hey, whatever floats her boat. This did not, however, float her boyfriend's boat, and he dumped her after he found out what kind of freaky stuff she was into. With her broken heart, Suki decides she needs to fulfill her weird craving and goes to a hot dog eating competition. It's quite common for people to throw up after participating in things like this. Who knew? So her plan was to have the winner vomit on her after the competition. A competitor named Hiro Tanaka wins the hot dog eating contest, and Suki sees he is about to hurl. She goes backstage to wait for him, stripping down to her Victoria's Secret lingerie to make the whole thing a little more sexy. Suki presents herself to him, but Tanaka, obviously not in the mood, tries to get away. This is when things get even crazier. Suki grabs him and jams her fingers down his throat. Hiro violently vomits chunks of undigested hot dogs all over her. She even manages to get some of his puke down her throat. Hiro is so disgusted, and we know by now you are too. He flees in horror, but in an even crazier twist, Suki starts to choke on the vomit chunks. She can't talk or breathe. No one is around, and she ends up falling to the floor and dies in a puddle of her own beloved vomit. Number 11. Killer beard. People have been sporting facial hair for thousands of years. Beards, mustaches, goatees, the totally rad and beloved sideburns, you name it. Facial hair has always been popular. Sometimes having so much hair on your face can cause occasional problems, like getting food stuck in your stash or it just starting to get itchy. But it's never usually anything too serious. Sadly though, one man had his own beard turn against him. Hans Steininger was a pretty big deal during his time period. In the 16th century, he was the mayor of his small town, Braunau am Inn, located in Austria and Germany. Although the kind of man he actually was, or how he served his public as a leader, has been forgotten, he still became a bit of a local legend after his death. Hans was remembered for having a beard nearly 5 feet or just about 1.5 meters long. Now that's pretty long. Despite being such an impressive man, his death was anything but. On September 28, 1567, a fire broke out in the town. Everyone was running around and freaking out. Usually Steininger wore his beard tied up and out of the way, but the day of the fire his beard was loose. It was flowing in the wind as he ran in fear. But while he was trying to escape, he accidentally stepped on his beard, tripped down his stairs, and broke his neck. But here's an interesting fact. The town of Braunamamin kept the mayor's beard. It's been preserved and on display for hundreds of years since that fateful day. It's quite the artifact. So if you ever find yourself between Austria and Germany and fancy seeing one of the most impressive beards in history, go check it out. Number 10. Gas Drank. In West Glacier, Montana on May 19, 2002, a bank robber named Cisco was on the run from the coppers and decided to hide out in the wilderness. He had more than enough money to make himself a new meth lab. So what does he do? He celebrates by knocking back a few drinks. Unfortunately, he accidentally smashes his last bottle of bourbon on a rock, which really ticked him off. Does he sound like a great guy? Wanting to get drunk but having no booze left, and not willing to get caught by authorities by setting foot in a bar or liquor store, he decides to siphon gasoline from his motorcycle, thinking he can drink it because it contains ethanol, which is a form of alcohol found in almost all forms of booze. But it's disgusting and Cisco can't keep it down. He vomits it back up into his campfire, which then roars when the alcohol hits it, and he is soon engulfed in flames. He's running around frantically, trying to put out the fire, but to no avail. The not-so-clever criminal is burnt to a crisp. After all, gasoline doesn't just contain ethanol. Number 9. Death by Gecko. David Dole was known as a lovable and goofy guy. The 34-year-old was a wonderful dad to 3 kids, and he never ever backed down from a challenge. At a Christmas party with family and friends, David's daring attitude would be the death of him. A friend dared David to do something extremely weird, and something any normal person would not do. He dared David to eat a gecko. Yes, a living gecko lizard like in the Geico commercials. So, he did. It's not exactly clear what the terms of the challenge were, like whether or not he had to eat the gecko whole or what what David did not expect was to be rushed to his local hospital just 2 days after eating the gecko. He had incredibly intense pain throughout his entire body. At first, David just thought he was getting sick or was possibly a bit hungover, but after being brought to the hospital, he suffered in agony there for 10 whole days before finally dying. It was one of the worst ways to die. Doctors said that his testicles had swollen to the size of grapefruits and had fluid leaking out of them. Yikes! And this all happened because of an accumulation of fluids built up inside his stomach cavity. He then went into surgery, but died on the table, basically from internal rotting. There was never an official cause of death, and it's unclear exactly how he died, though he was diagnosed with salmonella poisoning. Did he really think he could just eat a gecko and not have consequences? Do you think this is what caused the complications that led to his death? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 8. Vigilante. Vigilante was tired of petty crimes being committed every day, so he decided to do something about it. He became a superhero. Look out, bad guys, here comes Red Justice. Andy, wearing a cape and equipped with a cattle prod, reprimands these so-called criminals for jaywalking, littering, and other minor crimes. Then, one day Andy finds a group of people smoking marijuana on the rooftop of a warehouse. He shocks one of the smokers with a cattle prod, but retreats when the others go after him. He ends up dropping his cattle prod on the roof and then trips on his cape, but instead of flying, he falls over the edge, fracturing his skull and chest as he splats on the cement. Number 7. Peeing on a shark. On a beach in Brazil, a man was killed when he got the, quote, wise idea to pee on a shark. Does that sound wise to you? Marcelo Roca Santos was 51 years old. One day he was drinking with his friends, having fun, when he realized that he needed to go to the bathroom. He drank too much and couldn't hold it, So Marcello waded out in the water, relieved himself, and realized with great horror that he was literally peeing on an 8.5-foot tiger shark. The shark really didn't appreciate the golden shower and attacked. I mean, think about it from the shark's point of view. He was just minding his business, checking out the fish, and then all of a sudden the water around him got really warm. Gross! You'd be mad about that too. Marcello was pulled underwater, and seconds later, the blue water started turning a crimson red. His friends jumped in and pulled him back to shore, but it was too late. He was bleeding out. He had lost part of his arm, a piece of his leg was missing. They rushed him to the hospital, but he was pronounced dead almost immediately. I bet this story will make you think twice about peeing in the ocean. Number 6. Fishing revenge. Randall was not the most easygoing guy. He got frustrated very easily, and quite often even while at his job as an electrician. So his friends suggested he take up fishing. They thought it would really do him some good and might even calm his easily agitated nerves and anger. One day, Randall takes his friend's advice and goes to the lake. It wasn't really working out, though, because he couldn't catch anything, and he could feel his mood starting to boil. In an intense and insane fit of rage, he strings a 12,000-volt electrical wire into the lake in order to kill the fish. All the while he's doing this, he's got his head thrown back, laughing like an evil maniac, and calling up to the sky to God, asking if this is what he wanted. He's also screaming, "I'm not a fisherman, I'm an electrician." Can you picture how nuts that must look? Well, things got even crazier. Randall accidentally steps barefoot off the wooden boat seat onto the metal boat floor, where he was electrocuted and was killed pretty much instantly. Number 5. Yum! Cockroaches. We have another food competition on the list, and yes, this one is every bit as disgusting as the first one. The contest was being held at a local pet store in Deerfield Beach, Florida. There were about 30 contestants running. What was the grand prize, you ask? A python. What were they eating? Live cockroaches. I mean, of course, who wouldn't want to shovel a bunch of live cockroaches in their mouth for a pet snake? To win, you had to eat the most cockroaches out of everyone else. And one man named Edward Archibald was set on winning the snake for one of his good buddies. So he took on the challenge, thinking it would just be some harmless fun. But after shoving dozens and dozens of the crawling insects into his mouth, Edward began to choke. Insect parts were blocking oxygen from being able to enter his lungs, and eventually he died due to asphyxiation and the amount of cockroaches in his body. The owner of the pet shop and everyone who witnessed Edward's death were shocked and horrified. Even though he died, Edward had signed a disclaimer before participating in the competition, so no blame fell on the shop. Number 4. Musical mistakes. Joey was a guitar player who wanted to become a famous musician. He was alright, but needed more practice and better equipment. The problem, though, was he didn't have a lot of money. He was pretty much broke. He didn't even have enough to cover his bills that month. He was listening to a segment of his recording when suddenly the landlord knocked on his door asking if he had rent money. Joey panicked and hid in his Murphy bed. When the landlord uses his keys to come in, Joey stays in the bed and waits. However, when the landlord leaves, Joey's Murphy bed is stuck and he can't get out. To make things worse, Joey had soundproofed his room with cheap egg cartons. No one could hear his muffled cries for help, and Joey ended up suffocating to death. Number 3. Crashing cows. It's raining cows. Hallelujah, it's raining cows. Oh yeah. Okay, sorry, anyways. If you could choose the way you die, most people would choose to die in their sleep. Sounds pretty peaceful. But what if it wasn't so peaceful? A man named João Maria de Souza was sound asleep one night at his home in Brazil when out of nowhere a cow fell 8 feet, or just shy of 2.5 meters, through his bedroom roof and crushed him. Yeah, this actually happened. João's wife took him to the hospital to try and fix him up, but he ended up bleeding out due to the enormous 3,000-pound, or just about 1,300-kilogram bovine that landed on him. But how in the world did this happen? Well, apparently the animal had recently escaped from a nearby farm. João's house was right against a hill, so the cow must have been on the hill and couldn't tell where the hill ended and the roof started. His family was absolutely devastated. No one could have possibly seen this coming. The owner of the cow has yet to be discovered, but it's very possible that, if caught, he could go to court because of the death the tricky cow caused. Always be sure to tell the people in your life you love them, because you never know, they might be hit by a falling farm animal. Number 2. Money hags. This next listing is definitely one of the dumbest. A young and attractive woman from California named Brandy recently married an old geezer millionaire. Turns out she only loved him for his money. Who would have thought? Brandy wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but she wasn't the dullest either. The gold digger had been secretly skimming money out of her rich husband's accounts because he refused to raise her allowance due to the economy. Brandy would often hide inside her high-security vanity room to spend time with the money. I mean, we've all dreamed about swimming in money or throwing it up in the air like confetti, right? So one night, while she was skimming and messing around with her husband's money, an earthquake hits and shakes the room. The earthquake caused the heavy bags of money to fall and knock Brandy out, and then, with all the bags on top of her and no air to breathe, she suffocated to death. Hey, it's better than being crushed by a cow, right? Number 1. Boiling water. A young girl has died after drinking boiling water. Why did she do this? Well, she did it after watching someone on YouTube do it for a dare. Oh, the horrors of the internet. The dare was to drink boiling water out of a straw, so the little girl did it. But within minutes, she was having difficulty breathing and fell unconscious and needed to be rushed to the nearest hospital. 8-year-old Kiari Pope suffered burns to her mouth and throat, which led to the trouble breathing. She was rushed into emergency surgery for a tracheotomy, and this left her with chronic respiratory problems. She couldn't even talk, and even though she seemed to be getting better after a while, later she had difficulty breathing again, became unresponsive, and died after paramedics spent 40 minutes trying to resuscitate her. This is definitely a tragedy, and a big reason parents should monitor what their kids watch online. Thanks for watching.